Hello, and welcome to Mindful Mondays. I'm Tina Kepner, a licensed professional counselor in both the state of Texas and Mississippi. I am a full-time staff counselor at the University Counseling Center, and I am also an embedded counselor for Veteran and Military Affairs at the University of Mississippi. For today's Mindful Monday, we will explore being mindful and accepting of our grief. During our time together, we will explore ways in which we can acknowledge and accept our grief, as well as helpful ways in which to process through our grief. Grief is defined as the emotional suffering that we feel in response to loss. According to the Grief Recovery Institute, grief is the conflicting feelings caused by the end of change into something that is familiar to us. These feelings can include deep sadness, guilt, shock or disbelief, denial, anger, frustration, fear, or others. Sometimes physical symptoms are experienced as well, such as the inability to sleep or eat, inability to focus and think clearly, irritability, drowsiness, headaches, or nausea. It's important to note that there are different types of grief. Normal grief is the emotional distress that accompanies a trauma, such as a death or loss. Complicated grief is the type of grief that worsens over time and it interferes with daily functioning. Traumatic grief, the grief you feel after the sudden or unexpected loss of a loved one, often accompanied by shock, disbelief, and fear. Chronic grief is the type of grief that persists for a long time and doesn't diminish. Anticipatory grief is the grief that you feel before an impending loss, such as a terminal illness or a divorce. Disenfranchised grief is the grief you feel when the loss is not socially recognized or validated, such as a miscarriage, a pet's death, or a breakup. This list is not inclusive of all types of grief. I have just shared a few. For the sake of our time today, we will be focusing on disenfranchised grief, which my family and I have recently experienced. Again, disenfranchised grief is grief not openly acknowledged or accepted. Examples are a loss of a pet, loss of a body part, loss of personality due to dementia, or the loss of a non-blood relative, boyfriend, girlfriend, or an in-law. Now that we have an idea of what grief is defined as, what it feels like, and the types of grief there are, let's examine the stages of grief. Denial. This is the difficulty in accepting that a loss is real. Anger. Anger may be directed at many things or people, God, yourself, or possibly no one in particular. Bargaining, possibly reaching an agreement as to not have to deal with the loss. Depression, emotional detachment. Acceptance, which is embracing the loss. People don't always go through the process in this particular order, and some steps may last longer than others. There are typically 4 characteristics for successful grief resolution. 1. Accepting the reality of the loss. 2. Experiencing the pain of grief and emotions that follow. 3. Adjusting to a new environment without the person or situation. And 4. Withdrawing emotional energy and reinvesting it into another relationship. When grief is considered acceptable, there are rituals that can help ease the pain. This is not always the case for disenfranchised grief. My family recently experienced the loss of our beloved Lola. After almost 15 years as a member of our family, our yellow lab, Lola, crossed over the Rainbow Bridge in September. We have made the conscious and mindful decision to grieve regardless of what society may think or even say. She was just a dog. Lola was family, and we will grieve her as such. Being mindful and accepting of your grief can allow you to move forward and go through it. According to helpguide.org, it is absolutely necessary for you to face your grief and eventually deal with it. Today you will be witnessing my husband and I honoring Lola by planting a tree in her honor. We will now journey to my home, and I will share you the spot and the process of planting the Lola tree. The mindful process of our grief began when we chose the spot and type of tree to purchase. Here we are at the spot we have chosen to plant Lola's tree. We chose this spot due to it overlooking the kitchen sink where we find ourselves looking out the window often. We chose a maple to plant as it signifies endurance and fortitude, which seemed to be a good fit for Lola. It may seem to you that planting a tree is somewhat an uneventful activity. However, when you consider the meaning, it is quite special. Trees historically are thought of in terms of life-giving, immortality, love, strength, and eternity. Planting a tree is a way to remember someone when feeling great sadness and emptiness. Planting a tree can keep a loved one's memory alive. It will provide a place you can feel connected to the one you've lost. It can be a place where you can laugh and cry when you need to. Having this special place can be comforting. Often in those first days of losing a loved one, you may feel useless or unmotivated to even get out of bed. Beginning with just a bit of movement, we can hope to create the motivation to care for something in honor of the one you lost. It can make healing easier. Studies have shown positive effects of nature. Spending time outdoors helps alleviate feelings of depression and anxiety and can make us feel calmer. Right off the bat, digging and planting a tree provides exercise and movement. This form of exercise can help lower stress levels and lighten your mood, not to mention how gratifying it can be to complete a project. Forbes' article, Digging in the Dirt Really Makes People Happier, states that digging in the dirt really does lift your spirits. The digging stirs up microbes in the soil. Inhaling these microbes can stimulate serotonin production, which makes you feel happier and healthier. As stated by the Family Health, Psychiatric and Counseling Center, grief is defined as the emotional response to any type of loss. The goal in successful grief resolution is to reestablish emotional equilibrium. I truly believe that it looks different for everyone, and everyone processes grief differently. The most important is to acknowledge your grief and process through it. When you have trouble, practice patience and reach out for help. We all experience grief at some point in our life. Planting this tree for Lola and being able to see it often has brought great comfort in my family's grief. Grief is a personal and intimate process. Your relationship with whom you grieve is unique to you. As members of the Ole Miss community, you are never alone in your grief. Oftentimes, the hardest part in our journey towards better mental health is reaching out for help. There are grief groups available to staff members. As Ole Miss community members, you can all call the UCC to set up an appointment to visit with a counselor. You can also walk in Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., and the phone is answered 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can always call and talk to a mental health professional. Thank you for sharing your Monday with me today, and I hope you have a beautiful week. Remember to always take good care of you.